Olugbenya Adelana from Wema Bank. So the next session would be on increasing food production and market opportunities through the special agro-industrial processing zone. The pivotal objective is to turn the rural landscape into economic zones for prosperity, cluster the value chain operators, the critical value chain operators, from production to processing and to export in an area, in a geographical area that will reduce costs and help to increase margins and help to increase ease of doing business. So today, I have leading operatives in this sector that will help us do justice to this topic. The first person on the list is Dr. Zakari Tsiga, Program Operations Manager, SAPZ Coordination Team. That is the Special Agro-Industrial Processing Zone Coordination Team. Dr. Zakari Tsiga, if you are here, please join us on the podium. A round of applause for Dr. Tsiga. We also have with us Engineer Maruf Ajenifuja, the National Infrastructure Engineer for the SAPZ Coordination Team. Engineer Ajenifuja, if you are here, please join us. A round of applause for him as he comes on stage. Yeah, yes, please have your seat. And the next person is Ms. Jamila Hassan, National Gender and Social Safeguards Officer, the SAPZ Coordination Team. You're welcome, madam. Thank you all very much. You can sit. Okay, you are all welcome. So we'll be discussing this special and very strategic concept of special agro-processing zone and how it can help to achieve improved market access and improve food security, improve livelihoods for critical stakeholders in the agri value chain in Nigeria. The first question that I will ask would be for Dr. Tsiga. Now, with your extensive experience in project management and strategic program coordination, what are the key factors that have contributed to the successful implementation of SAPZ initiatives in developing nations?
Hello, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to give a slight intro with regards to what SAPZ is.
Okay.
So when you look at SAPZ, it's a special agro-industrial program in Nigeria. Can you hear me? Is that
the
issue?
mic is, can we
Hello?
have a better mic?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, so hold on. Okay. Hello, is this better?
Yes, better.
Oh, okay. As I said earlier, let me give a slight introduction regarding the SAPZ. So SAPZ is an agro-processing program for the first of its kind in Nigeria, looking at 8 states. So those 8 states, you look at the SAPZ is divided into 2 components. First of all, there is the development of the ATC, the Agricultural Transformation Center, which is mainly for primary processing of value chain, identified value chains. Then those ATCs feed into the AIH. The AIH itself is where you do the major processing of those value chain per state. Each state has its own unique value chains they identified. So when you come to your question with regards to the major success criteria for having a successful SAPZ, one of the first points is public-private partnerships, because the SAPZ is government-enabled and is private sector driven. So you need to create an environment whereby the government provides an enabling environment for the private sector. Number two, you have to have this government sponsorship. Government sponsorship in the sense that government needs to play a very important role to ensure the SAPZ flourish in the area. So they can do such by having incentives so that will attract investors into the area. And you can only, okay, another point is, for example, the third point will be, you need strategic funders. So because of the amount of infrastructure development you need in an SAPZ zone, you need to have all these development financial institutions such as the African Development Bank or ISDB to come into play that will help the government fund those activities. So those DFIs come into the SAPZ in developing generic private sector, generic activities that will make the private sector easily come into those processing zones. So we're talking maybe water treatment plant, power generation, infrastructure in those environments. So another aspect will be economic zones. So those SAPZ, government can try to make those SAPZ and economic zones whereby they provide, because those zones are processing materials and processing food stocks and whatnot. So those economic zones also have incentives. For example, make it easy for export, make it easy value addition, you understand, and private sector feel conducive to key into those areas. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I think we are having challenges with the mic. So from what you have said, critical success factor, we must have private sector operators, government support, financing, and then create an ecosystem that ensures sustainability of the project. Thank you very much. So the next question would be for Engineer Maruf Olalekun Ajenifuja. As an experienced project manager and engineer, what are the critical infrastructure components required to support the development of special agro-industrial processing zones?
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you for the question from the moderator. Essentially, I would like us to understand that there's a program designed for SAPZ, and in the program design, we have components. Two of the components specifically meant for infrastructure development. Number one is the component one, infrastructure development and agro-industrial hub management. Number two is the Agricultural Transformation Center, which is the ATC. But specifically, the area of infrastructure we have for AIH, which is the Agro-Industrial Hub, is all about the general infrastructure, the economic infrastructure, the social infrastructure, as well as the environmental infrastructure. If I break it down further, under the economic infrastructure, we have the road, we have the power supply, we have the provision of water for processing, we have the general infrastructure, including the general layout of the site. The attention and intention is to provide a dedicated land, parcellated, and equipped with desirable infrastructure that will make the site like the plug and play for agro-processing investors. So the idea is to have a clustered arrangement, bringing all agro-processors together in one location, just like in our village economies, where we have the location and localization of industries. So essentially, when we put all this infrastructure together, it requires a lot of funding, just like the previous speaker said. And under the SAPZ right now, from the AFDB side, we have over $140 million dedicated for developing 8 hubs in Nigeria in the first phase of SAPZ. So we focus more on providing those certification centers that will enable them have quality finished product from the processing of the agricultural materials. Then we have the provision of energy, optic fiber, we have the drainage system, we also cater for the water facilities in terms of the sewage system, the environmental infrastructure. Then we'll look at the social infrastructure also, including the administrative building. We have the training center, we have the ICT and stuff like that. So those are the hard infrastructure we have for the agro-industrial hub. But for the agricultural transformation centers, we have two categories of infrastructure. We have the hard infrastructure, we have the soft infrastructure. Under the hard infrastructure, we talk about the farm enhancing infrastructure, like the feeder roads, like the irrigation water scheme. We also look at the land preparation. Then we will have another thing we need to add there. The soft infrastructure include what we call the farm support services at the ICT platform, where we have the single registry of all the stakeholders, including the agro dealers, the input suppliers, the financial service providers, because we will link a lot of smallholder farmers to financial services, that we're going to have a kind of MOU with the Bank of Industry to provide some services in provision of agro processing equipment to both women and youth. And with my other speaker will speak on that. So essentially, the ATC is a community-based rural institution to facilitate affordable access of farmers, access to production drivers like quality seed, agrochemicals, fertilizers, in order to boost their productivity of raw materials that will be supplied to the agro-industrial hub. Because the idea is to use processing to drive production. We'll cluster the agro-processing investors that will need supply of raw material from the ATC in order for secondary value addition. So the ATC essentially is to ensure the boosting of the raw materials for the hub. And beyond that, the infrastructure component of SAPZ is about 65 to 70% of the funding for the first phase. This is essentially because we realize that you cannot be effective in agriculture if you are defective in infrastructure. So those are the basic things that we need to start looking at in the 21st century. For us to meet with the giant economy, the big force, we need to understand those things that help us deliver on our mandate. How can you fill 200 million people if you don't have adequate provision of infrastructure to actually enhance your productivity? So we are looking at that under SAPZ as a flagship that will take agriculture from the valley of history to the mountain of glory. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Engineer Ajenifuja. So very instructive. Apart from the hard infrastructure, you also need the soft infrastructure to support the scheme. The next question will be for Ms. Jamila Hassan. Given your expertise in gender and social safeguards, how do you ensure that SAPZ initiatives promote gender equity and social inclusion in rural communities? I guess that is also speaking to part of the soft infrastructure that Engineer Ajenifuja was trying to speak about. So, Ms. Jamila.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah.
The design of the SAPZ is such that it incorporates enabling infrastructure, which is climate smart and gender friendly. SAPZ accommodates 50% participation of women and youth in the program. And of the 50%, 5% is dedicated to vulnerable people and people with special needs. So to add to that, gender-friendly equipments which are provided are equipments and facilities such as touch buttons, keys, and trackpads. Also, the SAPZ has a SIA agreement which beneficiaries, contractors, extension workers, and all stakeholders are mandated to sign. And what SIA means, it's sexual exploitation and harassment. So this ensures that the rights of women and vulnerable people are protected. In addition to that, we have an anonymous hotline which affords affected people the right to make reports, and this is anonymous, which means you don't know who calls and you don't know who receives the call. So the SAPZ program has made provision for that, and we equally have gone further to ensure that beneficiaries are mapped, profiled, and grouped. And in that grouping of farmer organizations, we have women holding leadership positions in those groups. Thank you.
Thank you. So, generally, it is very clear that SAPZ, the concept of SAPZ is very strategic and very wholesome for sustainable agro-industry development. And you have all spoken to the critical sector success factor, critical infrastructure needs, and gender mainstreaming and social safeguards. Now, given your experiences, I want you to, this is a general question for everyone, and I want you to speak specifically to some of them. I have 3 questions here. You must speak to the one that you are most comfortable with, or I will just call on any of you for any of the 3. Now, the first question is, how do public-private partnerships play a role in the success of SAPZ, and what strategies do you recommend to attract private investment in these zones? So I will ask Engineer Olalekan to speak on that briefly, very briefly.
Yeah, as we said earlier on, SAPZ is government-enabled and private sector-led. Without PPP, SAPZ would be like a kind of paper tiger. No, what do we mean by that? The government is providing enabling environment in terms of infrastructure. PPP works better for us because the agro-processing investors are private entities that are coming to operate in the hub. Now, for instance, we have a power investor that want to build up a power plant. There will be a need for what they call PPA, that's power purchasing agreement, with the investors. So it's a form of PPP that they will use to run the site. After completing the site, we'll have what they call private sector SPV, that's the special purpose vehicle. So, which everything is around PPP, and the government will only have a minority stake in it. So at the end of the day, the private sector players are still the major actor on SAPZ. Without them, it won't succeed because government comes and goes. But the reality is, interest of the project surpasses the government of the day. And that's why they build it around private sector entity for them to work with. So we invite a lot of private sector, come for more clarification, for better participation, to make SAPZ what it's supposed to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the next question would be for Ms. Hassan. The question is, what are the most significant barriers to successful implementation of SAPZ, and how can they be overcome to ensure sustainable economic growth in rural areas?
Sorry, can you say that again?
I said, what are the most significant barriers to the successful implementation of SAPZ in your own understanding, and how can they be overcome to ensure sustainable economic growth in rural areas?
So I think in ensuring sustainable economic growth, we need to ensure that, as Engineer Marif has said, the private sector is being incorporated into the SAPZ, because all the SAPZ does is to provide enabling infrastructure. We just provide incentives, and then the private sector carries it on full on. So I think in ensuring that the SAPZ carries on and is successful and promotes economic growth, there is a need to ensure that the private sector is being carried along. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought as a gender person, you also talk about how gender helps with the sustainability aspect.
Well, I could equally say that women inclusion.
Yeah.
Yes. So not just women, but people with special needs are not overlooked. One of our slogans is leaving no one behind. So we do not just ensure that women are involved or are participatory in the program, we also ensure that people with special needs are given due consideration, and that equally extends to vulnerable people who we can say, for example, are the IDPs, internally displaced people from probably terrorism and the likes of it. So yes, the SAPZ ensures that everyone is included in the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Finally, Dr. Tsiga, this question is for you. How can collaboration between government agencies and local community be enhanced to maximize the impact of SAPZ on food production and market opportunities?
Okay, thank you very much. So, in order to do that, I think one of the most important things to do is to identify the stakeholders. So when you identify stakeholders, you look at the entire value chain, first of all, both in the private and in the public space, including the farmers. So you do a proper stakeholder mapping. Once that is done, then you are looking at implementing a communication strategy, which should be all-inclusive. So when I mean all-inclusive is at every stage in time, you are carrying all the stakeholders. Everybody is aware of what he's supposed to do, and his importance. Knowing what you're supposed to do and knowing your importance means you're already part of the project, directly or indirectly. Then we're also looking at capacity building. Because once you identify all the stakeholders, you're looking at farmers, you're looking at public sector, you're looking at private sector. Everybody has its own unique characteristics, and everybody has its own requirements and this thing. So that capacity building is a way of you tailoring each stakeholder, making them aware of what they need to do, building on the gaps they have, and also ensuring that you limit the barriers to the successful SAPZ. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. We have all spoken well to the issue, and I'm sure our audience will have one or two questions to ask or clarification. Okay, I can see hands up already. Dr. Edidion and Alaji. So let's start from him, please.
Thank you very much. I am pleased to have you there, the special agri-processing zones, right? Now, I've heard the question came about collaboration. I believe you are not starting this project from the scratch. From my experience, between 2005 and 2016, I had at various times served on the board of the Nigerian Export Processing Zones Authority. And that was when we started what was called Export Farm Scheme. And there was one that was approved for General Nyako, retired at Adamawa State, where he was processing and exporting. And I also know that the Nigerian Export Promotion Council, which I also had a privilege to serve on their governing board, had what was called Export Production Village Scheme. All these, when I, as a policy person in these schemes, I see that what you are discussing dovetail into all those things. So it's not, you're not inventing any wheel. That's why I want to ask. Look at those two schemes. The NEBZA Export Farm Scheme program that gave birth to Sabore Free Zone in Adamawa State. Look at the export production villages of Nigerian Export Promotion Council. See, why have they not functioned beyond where they were? Because, one, anything that is a free zone or a cluster that's waiting on the private sector person to come to an empty land or a fenced round land and provide infrastructure will not fly. So the concept of successful free zones or processing zones will could be based on the fact that you get the land, develop it, and make sure that you provide the infrastructure. No investor will come and put his electricity investment in your land because of government changes. So for every state, so go to the states. If you have not looked at the states, look at how many hectares of people's lands all the state governments have acquired for export processing zones or free trade zones and stuff, and see if those lands can be better utilized by you guys than go for new lands, because they will be already partners for you for collaboration. I just say, let me make that input. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any of you that want to take that, or we take the second question then? Okay, go ahead, sir.
Okay, good day, everyone. I just want to re-acknowledge our presence at the people of Zamfara State. A few weeks back, you are at Zamfara and you have seen the potentialities there in Zamfara for hosting this project, this upcoming project to Zamfara. My only question is on the issue of gender. You made mention of engaging or giving opportunity to about 50% of women and the people with special needs. Please, how do you intend to do that? Thank you.
So we intend to, before selection of beneficiaries, we intend to carry out a mapping and profiling process. And by doing that, we ensure that women are invited, women are encouraged to participate. So by doing that, I think once we've done our mapping and profiling, we'll be able to ensure that women are carried along. And yeah, that's what we intend to do.
And the first question from Dr. Edidion.
Yeah, in response to the first contribution, let me first of all thank you for your wisdom in advising us in order to learn from the past. Actually, SAPZ has completed the learning curves, and that's why we took the bull by the horn by providing those enabling infrastructure to serve as a bait to attract the private sector investors to come and operate the zone, so that it become like a plug-and-play scenario. So, and we have a lot of financial incentive that we're using also as instrument to bring them in, and apart from the social and financial inclusion when they are operating in the zone. So we'll take your advice and we'll ride with that. Thank you so much.
Do you have anything to say? Okay, that will be all for this session. Thank you all for listening, and thank you for coming to educate us on the special agro-industry processing zone.